Okay, I'm here with Trevor Devall. Trevor Devall of Me, Myself, and Die. He's an accomplished voice actor. He needs no introduction.
And yet,
here I am. We're at Gen Con 2024 at the Conrad Hotel, and we want to talk about Broken Empires.
Yeah.
You know? I just watched a panel in which you talked about Broken Empires, and I have just played recently a game online with you in which you graciously ran Broken Empires. And I'm excited, but can you give us like the elevator pitch?
So the game is entirely based on mime.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Sorry, that's from a previous take. The Broken Empires is a game that is 40 years in the making, in that I have taken all of the games that I have run and played over the 40 plus years I've been doing this, and there's been hundreds of them, and I've cherry-picked kind of the best parts that I like, both old school and new school stuff, and I've put them together in such a way as to make them play well together.
Nice.
And I've been inspired by so many giants, of course, but what I wanted to do was make a game that serviced my needs and what I like in a game. So what I like in a game, I'm sort of more of a simulationist guy, but not too simulationist, because I like speed of play as well. So every game is on a spectrum, as we know: detail of resolution, speed of outcome. So I tend to fall in the detail of outcome side, but I want to pull everything back to the speed so we can get through stuff, and that's what I am doing with this game. In your panel, you mentioned a bunch of different sources for different rules. You're borrowing from Harnmaster, you're borrowing from Mithras, even Forbidden Lands. But it seems to me, from what I've played and from how you described it, it's more than the sum of its parts. How do you ensure that it's not just a Frankenstein game with a bunch of different disparate mechanics? We have a term in the RPG world that all of us are familiar with, I'm sure, the Heartbreaker game. And all that meant, of course, was that some guy played D&D and said, what if I did a different type of hit point? And otherwise everything was the same. Yeah. So that is not this. How do you ensure that it's not just a Frankenstein thing? What I've done, I think the way you described it is pretty accurate. It is more than the sum of its parts. So for example, the game is a D100 system. However, it's quite different from any other D100 system while borrowing from many. So it takes sort of your basic Mithras BRP system, which is everything skill-based, and you want to roll under your skill to succeed. However, it takes from Delta Green, in which you want to roll under, but high. And it takes from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, 4th edition, the idea of success levels. And in my case, that's what you roll on the 10s die, basically. And then you spend those success levels on things like choosing hit location or performing different combat maneuvers or whatever. So you take all of that together, and yes, they are clearly identifiable parts from all these other games, but no other game uses that specific combination. And it makes a huge difference because, for example, if you were playing BRP or Mithras or something like that, if you had a character with a skill of 90, let's say, that guy's never going to fail. In my game, it's about the quality of success. So you could have a 90 skill, but that does not necessarily guarantee you're going to get everything you want, because everything's about that success level. So if you rolled 87, you get 8 success levels. If you rolled 2, you get 1 success level because there's a minimum of 1. So having a high skill in my game is a high potential of outcome, but you can't bet the farm on it. And that dice resolution mechanic was from Delta Green? The concept of blackjack as a dice mechanic was from Delta Green, and then I took it and, like, for example, I do things quite differently. Even in Delta Green, you still have, I think, don't quote me on this, you still have the idea that you critical if you roll, I think it's 1 to 5 maybe, is that right? I can't remember. In my game, it's doubles under, and if you roll your exact skill number, that's also critical success. Doubles over its critical fail. Right. That's super fun. I love it. Blackjack is the right metaphor. You're trying to roll low but high. And you're also borrowing from Ars Magica with your spells. Can you describe that a little bit? Yeah, so Ars Magica is, I think, the greatest spell system ever conceived. Yeah, when I discovered Ars Magica way back, I saw this thing and I went, oh, finally wizards can be wizards. Finally, wizards can take the stuff and essence of magic and harness it to their will, rather than having a predetermined list of spell effects that they do by rote. And every time you cast a fireball, it's always the same thing. Oh yes, maybe you roll slightly different damage, but everybody knows what's going to happen. So Ars Magica said, no. You take the stuff of the universe and you combine it to get an effect. And so when I was running Harnmaster, I basically took Ars Magica and repurposed it for Harnmaster, and then with the Broken Empires, I essentially took that and repurposed it for my system. So philosophically, it's the same as Ars Magica, but in execution it's quite different.
Nice. Okay, so with magic, I love the magic thing. It's so freeform in a way, right? And when I played a Godbound in your game, and when I wanted to cast something, a miracle, I just described the thing, and then you told me which elements go together. And that's the same thing with the social encounters, where the player describes their action and then the GM interprets the skill being used.
Right. So yeah, the players say what they're going to say, or they, and based on the words that are chosen, not the performance or the attitude or the acting of the player. That has nothing to do with it, but based on the words that are used, and the GM interprets that and chooses a specific skill that corresponds with that, and then the character rolls that skill to succeed. So
in a way, the player doesn't worry. They don't have to even really look at their character sheet when that much at all when they're thinking about their actions in trying to solve a problem. They're just trying to think, you know, what would my character do? And then they act that out. What would my spell look like? What am I trying to do with my spell?
Right.
They're not trying to game it or anything on their sheet. It's interesting though, because the game also has some complexity to it. And I think the complexity I saw most was in combat, where there are hit locations and stuff. Can you walk through what it would look like to attack somebody and hit somebody?
In this game, when you roll to attack, there's a lot of information that comes on that die roll. So in a typical round, there is an initiative, okay? The players have an initiative die, kind of like a resource die from Forbidden Lands. It goes from D4 to D12. They roll. NPCs and enemies don't, they have a fixed initiative. So the players roll, and whatever they roll is the initiative they go on. So if you rolled a D6 and you rolled a 5 and the enemy was at 3, which is pretty standard, you'd go before that. Now let's say there was another player and he rolled a 4. Both of you would go before that enemy, but because both of you go before that enemy, you can choose in which order you go. So there's a little bit more tactical freedom there to set up certain things. So that's initiative. When you want to attack somebody, obviously you have to be in the same zone as them. A lot of the wargamers will hate me, but yes, I'm incorporating zones from various games like Forbidden Lands, because I feel that they provide a mechanical heft with interesting flexibility as well. So you have to be in the same zone as them if you're doing a melee attack. So you roll your skill in medium weapons, let's say, if you're using a sword. Now that target has an opportunity to defend themselves. That can be a parry, that can be a dodge, whatever the case is. You can do multiple parries for multiple attacks, but it's with a gradually increasing penalty. The details. The point is, I go to attack, you can defend. If I succeed my roll, that's going to generate a certain amount of SLs, success levels, which is based on the 10s die of what I rolled. I might also have additional bonuses. If I have expertise in that skill, maybe I get +1 SL. So if I rolled a 32 on my skill of 50, that would be 3 SL. But I have +1 expertise, so it's actually 4 SLs. So let's say you rolled your defense and you parried, but you rolled 2 SLs. Well, I've got 4, you've got 2. We're both successful, but I'm more successful. But your parry doesn't negate my attack, but your successes subtract from mine. So if I got 4 and you got 2, I succeed with 2.
Yeah.
So the quality of the hit is mitigated by the quality of the defense. And whatever's left over turns into damage, which you then add to a static damage to the weapon, as well as you can spend SLs on combat maneuvers. But we still have the 1s die of that roll. So the 1s die corresponds to the hit location. 1 to 5 is the body, and then its various arms and legs and head is 10. If I hit you in a place where you have armor, that armor could very well soak up all the damage, and that's no good if you're trying to brain someone. So you can spend some SLs on choose location, for example. Oh, I hit you in the body, but I know that you have no armor in the head. I'm going to spend a certain amount of SLs based on the weapon I'm using to hit you in the head instead. I hit you in the head, whatever is left over from my total SLs minus your armor is the wound value of that particular wound. And there's a little subchart to tell us where that wound happens. Has no mechanical heft, it's just an interest thing. So a hit to the head is a hit to the head is a hit to the head. But we want to know, is it the nose, the eye, the ear, the face? Just because it's cool to know that.
Yeah.
And you record that wound. So you've got a 3-point wound in the right cheek, let's say, or a 3-point slash in the right cheek. Well, at that point you have a wound die. And the wound die is going to determine whether you're incapacitated by that hit or not. And you have characters that are tougher that probably won't be incapacitated by small things like that, small wounds like that. But yeah, that's basically how it works. And incapacitation, as you can imagine, is bad. However, people say to me, so is it a lethal system? No, it's not a lethal system, but it resolves quickly. Very rarely do fights end in death. Fights will end in screaming and begging for their lives or unconsciousness or surrender.
Okay. So I'm not super simulationist. I don't have a good background in like Harm Master and all those games. When I first played your game, that was the combat where it's multiple factored, was the slowest for me. As you play any game, you get better at it, it gets faster, that's natural. And in your playtesting, how fast does it get? How fast can they navigate through an attack and a damage?
It's very much like Harm Master. When I started to run Harm Master, when you look at Harm Master, you think, oh, this is like doing taxes. But then you internalize it, and as soon as you do that, and it took me about 2 sessions of running Harm Master before I went, yeah, got it. And it was the same with my players, and it has been the same in our playtests. After 2, maybe 3 sessions, you get the players going, okay, great. Oh, I got net 4 SLs, and he had 2 points of armor. Okay, that's 2. Okay, I'm going to, yeah, my weapon. Oh yeah, I can disarm him for 2, so I'm going to disarm him and do 4 damage.
Yeah, okay. I'm playing a game of Forbidden Lands right now, and some of the PCs are very, there's not levels in the game, but they have a lot of talents.
Yeah.
They've acquired a huge talent stack, I would say. And when it's their turn, they are sorting through, and one of our awesome players made a card for each talent, but some of our players have a deck of talents that they're sorting through to figure out what they want to do. What happens in Broken Empires when you've played 30 sessions? Does the PC get like loaded with options?
No. We do have things called specialties in the game, which act very much, well, they are called talents, because specialties are technically expertise and talents. But that's actually an important distinction, because expertise, all it does is it allows you to gain additional success levels from a successful roll. A talent is an exception-based rule that allows you to do something special, like a talent in Forbidden Lands. But those things are expensive to buy, and they're very specific, and they manifest in very specific situations. So, for example, you might have the talent that's +1 damage with all axes. Okay, well, if you're a guy who's using an axe, it's probably unlikely you've also got a sword and a spear. You're probably an axe guy. So you know that when you hit with your weapon, it's going to be +1 damage. But in any event, that's written right there, so it's clear. But the talents that you get in this game, because they are so specific and expensive to buy as you progress, they're also very valuable. It's much easier for someone to progress by building their skills rather than buying talents. And that's reflected in the XP cost for developing your character as you go. So I don't imagine that people, I mean, they're going to have talents, but I don't foresee that, because I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm in a Forbidden Lands game too, and as much as I love that game, I have that problem. I've got like 10 talents, and I'm like, okay, what applies now?
Sure. It's a problem in a lot of games.
It's a problem in a lot of games. It was a problem with D&D 3.5 when the feat became a thing.
It's a problem with 5e, it's a problem with a lot of games,
So I've tried to dial back on that just because the game is really about your skills. So it's far better in most cases to spend your XP on trying to get those skills up, because that's going to help you in a much broader set of applications.
How many skills are in the game?
I think 37 all in.
Are there any unnamed skills that you kind of define? And
yeah, there is. In the lore skills, we have things called wises, which is inspired by Burning Wheel, and that just means that if the player has an idea for a very specific lore that they know, they can buy that particular skill. Yeah.
How do you earn XP?
By pursuing your goals. This is a crucial concept to the game. This is not about delving dungeons and killing monsters and getting gold, although it can be. It's about characters pursuing a goal and overcoming obstacles in pursuit of that goal in order to reach their objective.
And are there different kinds of goals?
Yeah, there are. I mean, the specifics of the goal are totally up to the player, which they develop in conjunction with the GM. It's a very fluid, organic process, but there's essentially short-term, long-term, and shared goals with the party. And anytime you overcome an obstacle or attempt to overcome an obstacle, which is by rolling dice, that's very specific, you get XP towards that. And every time you complete an objective as well, a goal, you get more XP for that.
So do you track the progress of a goal like you do in Ironsworn?
Not technically like that. It's mostly, I mean, most of the goals are going to be very obvious, right? Like if my short-term goal is to get to the end of the dungeon and kill the orc leader, well, we know whether I succeeded or failed. If my long-term goal is to track down the assassin that butchered my family and bring him to justice, we also know whether that's going to succeed or fail, but that is a much, much longer thing. So we don't need to track progress mechanically for that. That's fairly apparent in the narrative. You know, like in that case with the assassin. Well, I know if I've captured the assassin, narratively speaking, right? It's very clear.
Just to play devil's advocate, though, you are giving examples of binary success failure goals. What if your long-term goal is to overthrow the town's regime and replace the regime, and there are overt steps or maybe more abstract steps towards that goal? I mean, what if you don't know where it actually hits?
So obviously that's ultimately going to be up to the GM to decide where that hits, but there's nothing stopping you from breaking your long-term goal into a series of short-term goals.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Right? So if I know that I want to overthrow the town's regime, my first step might be I need to infiltrate the guard and find information about the leader. That's a short-term goal.
Yeah.
So when you pursue both of those, you get XP for both, the long-term and the short-term. The next step is, okay, now I know about the leader. I'm going to scout out his location. I'm going to determine the guard, the changing of the guard around his whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so you can break those up.
Okay, that's amazing. So in your channel, at the time of recording, you are playing out the game itself, kind of developing the game on camera, and
like a crazy person.
Like a crazy person. That's crazy. Okay, because I've tried doing what you do, but with like 15 fewer cameras and with a game that's already been made, and it's too hard for me. But regardless, you're doing that. That's season 4. Are you going to continue to play Broken Empires throughout? You know, is this your game now for your channel?
No, not for the channel. It will be my game as I run it in life, in person, because I want to continue supporting it, obviously, and I want to keep developing stuff that we can then provide to those who are back in the project, because nobody likes a project that just suddenly loses all of its support. So no, it won't be the sole exclusive system of the seasons going forward, because mostly I can't imagine another season right now. I'm so burnt out. I'm tempted to say there will be no more seasons going forward. But more to the point, there's way too many games out there that I love that I want to try.
Yeah.
So,
there's so many games.
Yeah.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, so Me, Myself, and I is all about you playing solo. Is Broken Empires, it's not a solo RPG, but will you have solo rules?
Yeah, so I'm kind of torn on this. The answer is yes, but I'm kind of torn on this because when people say to me, oh, so are you going to have special solo rules? I think, you don't need them. Just get Mythic. Just get Mythic GM Emulator. That's what I've done for every season of the show, with the exception of Ironsworn. You can take any role-playing game and take Mythic, or your Oracle of choice, put them together, and guess what? Solo rules. So I kind of feel like developing specific solo rules for this game is kind of trying to reinvent the wheel. However, this game is mechanically complex. And there's a lot going on. And it's tough on one person to run this solo. I speak from experience. There's a lot to keep track of. It is totally possible. It just takes a lot more effort. And I know that solo players tend to want to avoid that kind of effort, in general, not everybody, because they're trying to get to the narrative thrust, right? Me, that's really not actually my focus. My focus is I want to experience this game, and the narrative will emerge from that experience. It's not the other way around. I'm not imposing a story on something. But I do know that this particular engine is going to require kind of a particular approach when it comes to solo. And I thought, who better to help me out with that than the man himself, Sean Tompkin, of Ironsworn, who has agreed to sort of consult on the rules. I originally wanted him to write the whole rule set, but we're going to go to print long before he'll get a chance to get to it with his crazy schedule. So he's agreed to sort of like look at the stuff I provide and put his spin on it and tweak it up. So
that's couldn't have picked a better person.
He's the guy. But we're trying to get as many people as possible because, of course, with the Kickstarter on day 1, you need to have everybody come on and pledge to guarantee that that thing not only funds, but also triggers the algorithm of Kickstarter itself to start pushing it out to other people who might be interested.
So that it'll be a game we love.
Game we love, exactly.
Maybe you can do like a telethon. Who's that guy?
Jerry Lewis.
Hey ladies, you buy the game person.
Do that for 4 hours straight. 1-800 number at the bottom. What are your thoughts on or plans for stretch goals, or are you doing stretch goals?
We're still kind of figuring that out. Because honestly, we want to keep the campaign simple. We want. I don't like all of this extra stuff that we'd have to deal with, because my goal is to create the best role-playing game I can. The decent base level game gets you the book, but it also gets you a starter set, a la what Forbidden Lands has been, or Free League has been doing. because that really harkens back to the old days with the old box sets and stuff. And in that box set, you'd get a really slimmed down version of the rules, a bunch of pre-gen characters, some dice, some maps, some little, you know, doodads and knickknacks and stuff like that to help run the adventure in the box, in the starter set. And then from there, the next tier would be, oh, well, the leather-bound deluxe edition, yes, perhaps even signed by Trevor Devall, my goodness. So there's that. But in terms of like, oh, well, you know, what about miniatures? We talked about that. I don't think we're going to go that route with this Kickstarter because I don't want people to think that this is a minis game, because it's really not. It's, you know, it's still a role-playing game.
Yeah.
There are zones, yeah. And that'll be on the maps.
Right.
But yeah, I don't want to give the people the impression that it's like Pathfinder where you need to count hexes or stuff.
Sure.
It's deeply tactical, but not in a way that you need a hex map.
Exactly, yeah. Zones are great in that sense. The
thing that has emerged from this game that everybody's talking about are, I couch this information by calling it the 4 conflict arenas of the game, okay? Because they all utilize this system in slightly different ways. Obviously, you've got combat, and we've already gone through combat a bit and got a sense of that. But then you've got travel, you've got the social mechanics, and you've got magic. So the travel mechanics, this is something, this astounds me that I've had this reaction. People say to me, wow, you've got these travel mechanics that seem so fun and risky, and we just, you know, I've never been through this. And I'm like, how can you have never been through that? It's par for the course for me. Of course travel's gonna be, getting there is half the fun. But so many people, either because they don't know how to present an epic travel or a dangerous travel, they just kind of hand wave it, or they say, okay, well, you know, roll a constitution check, and if you fail, you'll arrive at the dungeon with some damage or something. And I just think, why are you glossing over the best part? So I developed a system that is heavily influenced by the One Ring, but again, has a bunch of my own stuff into it, where travel is not only entirely based on the choices of the characters, because choice of route is a very, very important thing. You guys decided to go straight through the forest, which was a dreadful mistake.
A lot of stains.
A lot of travel stains, yes. Which, of course, is like fatigue, right? And you don't want to get to your destination with too much fatigue, but the basic premise of the game is the players have a lot of agency in terms of the route or route, I think I said route before, that they choose to get there, because that's going to make a big difference. And there's going to be consequences. Do we need to get there fast through the dangerous part, or can we take our time, but we might miss getting there, or we're going to incur too many travel stains because we're on the road too long. So it's broken into 3 things. Basically, you've got your travel duties. You've got your guide, your quartermaster, and your scout. And the guide's job is to get you as far as possible without encountering an event, because you're going to have events on the road. They might not all be bad, but events are almost always tiring. So the goal of the guide is to get you to your destination in as few hexes as possible, and as few rolls as possible. The quartermaster's job is to make sure that people aren't as tired as they might be. So, you know, the quartermaster is dealing with supplies and making sure you find good camping spots. It's very abstracted, but it's still very much based on those skills and those choices they make. And then the scout's job is to ensure that the event that you have, because it's inevitable, is favorable to you, because it could either be an opportunity for you to get something good or a danger in which you have to try and avoid or deal with otherwise. And that system, the playtesters have really been impressed by it. They've been terrified of it, which is the goal, because I want travel in the game to be something you've got to prepare and steel yourself for. Not that not every journey is going to be, you know, a walk to Mordor, but close.
Yeah, I mean, the travel in our game was harrowing, and the stains added up.
Yeah.
And that was really the biggest threat to our party, I felt, was just stain after stain, which they're not easy to get rid of. But, you know, it's all by design. That's the way you wanted it.
Right,
so.
And there are ways to mitigate that by choosing the correct route. Like if you pick a route that goes through a friendly area, what I call a green zone, there's a chance you might actually reduce some of those travel stains if you rest there. It's like our Lothlorien, right? You take your rest here, Frodo of the Shire.
Yeah.
So there's the conflict arena. And then there's the social conflict arena, which again, yes, it mechanizes social conflict in a way, but it doesn't do so at the expense of role-playing, because that is the thing that a lot of people are always scared about when they think, oh, social combat. Well, then you're not role-playing, you're just rolling dice. No, not the case. And in my game, if you're in a significant social situation where there's something at stake, because there should always be something at stake, then your approach is going to determine, your approach as the player, as through the role-playing, is going to determine what skill of the characters gets triggered. If you use words and your approach is very persuasive, then that's going to trigger the persuade skill. If your approach is very intimidating, it's going to trigger. If it's inspiring, it's going to trigger that. And that is up to the GM to interpret, right? But of course, this is a gentleman's agreement. We're all playing a game together here. Nobody's trying to gotcha, right? The idea is that there's always some amount of negotiation. If a player makes an impassioned speech and then tries, you say, okay, well, that's inspire, and the player says, but my inspire skill sucks. I was trying to persuade him. The GM at that point can either say, okay, I'll give it to you, sure, it can be a persuade, or they can say, well, sorry, choose your words better next time, which is a way better way to play it.
Yeah, just be hard.
Be hard,
yeah.
Because it trains the players, it trains the table adapts very quickly to the stakes and to those rules, and they immediately get it. They're like, okay, guys, we have to be they have to be tactical in their approach.
They have to think and be deliberate. Yeah.
And they have to think in character.
Yeah.
Because if you are if you're a player with a character that has a great persuasion but a terrible intimidate, then do not speak intimidating words because your character will be forced to do something that they're no good at.
Yeah.
And failure hurts the whole party.
Yeah. I can say firsthand that the social encounter mechanic structure that you built up is robust enough that it can act as the final battle of a session, which is what you did in our session.
Right.
It was a nail-biting, pretty dramatic back and forth where you're trying to reach a certain threshold, a certain number of, what was it,
success levels
for that encounter, at which point the party gets what they want or the good thing happens. And it was robust. It was the real deal. I think it was my favorite part of the session.
Cool.
Because of the way you structured it. So good job on that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very important to me that GMs in this game will have the mechanical support to create a conflict in many different forms. Not everything has to be a big boss battle with the bad guy at the end of the dungeon, right? You can resolve a conflict socially, you can resolve it magically, you can resolve it with violence, there's many ways to skin the cat.
Yeah, I'm going to put the information down below so you can throw in your support, and if you have any questions or comments, you can leave those in the comments. So that's Trevor. Check him out on Me, Myself, and Die and his Patreon, because you have an awesome Patreon.
I do. Thank you all the patrons.
All right, we'll see ya.
Bye.